Well, good morning. Welcome to another production of A Christmas Memory. I think this is our third or fourth year. Christmas Memory is a short story by Truman Capote. It was originally published in Mademoiselle magazine in December 1956. It was subsequently reprinted in the Selected Writings of Truman Capote in 1963. It was issued in a standalone hardcover edition by Random House in 1966. It has been published in many separate editions and anthologies ever since. Capote never admitted that the story was biographical. There are, however, certain elements in the story that correspond to his own life. For instance, he was raised in an extended family household in rural Alabama in the 1930s, and he did attend a military school as a young person. The story describes a period in the lives of a 7-year-old boy, Buddy, the narrator, and an elderly woman who is his distant cousin, but also his best friend. The narrative focuses on country life, friendship, the joy of giving during the Christmas season, and it also gently yet poignantly touches on loneliness and loss. You will notice that in the story, Buddy's best friend does not have a name. However, in a later work, Capote talked of an elderly, eccentric woman who was named Zook. Many have assumed that Buddy's best friend is the same person. The story has been broadcast, recorded, filmed, and staged multiple times in several award-winning productions. The first time it was adapted for television was in 1966 by ABC's Stage 67. It starred that wonderful character actress Geraldine Page and a young Donnie Melvin. Truman Capote was the narrator. Both the teleplay and Geraldine Page won Emmys for the production. Our memories of Christmas celebrations are often of a mixed variety. Oh yes, there are those memories that make us smile and warm our hearts. However, there are other memories of past Christmases that remind us that life is not perfect. We live with the mixed bag of emotions, of sweetness and sourness, memories that make us feel good, memories that sadden us, memories that lift our spirits, memories that feel as if there is a sack of cement on our shoulders. Capote has captured this mixed bag of emotional memories in this story. Doug Cummins will be the voice of Buddy, speaking about his memory of a past Christmas. Judy Neal is the voice of Zook, a 60-year-old eccentric woman and 7-year-old Buddy's best friend. The story takes place in late November in rural Alabama in the 1930s. Sit back, close your eyes, let your imaginations wander as you listen to this adaptation of A Christmas Memory.
A Christmas Memory. A woman with shorn white hair is standing at the kitchen window. She is wearing tennis shoes and a shapeless gray sweater over a calico dress. She's small and sprightly, like a bantam hen. But due to a long youthful illness, her shoulders are painfully hunched. Her face is remarkable, not unlike Lincoln's, craggy like that and tinted by sun and wind. But it's delicate too, finely boned. And her eyes are sherry-colored and timid.
Oh my, it's fruitcake weather. I knew it before I got out of bed. The courthouse bell sounded very cold and clear, and there were no birds singing. They've gone to warmer country, yes indeed. Oh, buddy, stop stuffing biscuits in your mouth and fetch our buggy. Help me find my hat. We've got 30 fruitcakes to bake.
I am 7, and she is 60-something. We are cousins, very distant ones, and we have lived together, well, for as long as I can remember. We are each other's best friend. It's always the same every year in November. My friend announces, "It's fruitcake weather. Fetch our buggy. Help me find my hat." The hat is found. A straw cartwheel corsage with faded velvet roses. It once belonged to a more fashionable relative. Together, we, along with Queenie, our tough little orange and white rat terrier, who has survived distemper and 2 rattlesnake bites, guide our buggy into the grove of pecan trees. 3 hours later, we are back in the kitchen hauling a heaping buggy load of wind-fallen pecans. Our backs hurt from gathering them. How hard they were to find among the concealing leaves and the frosted and deceiving grass. A miniature thunder sounds as the shells collapse and the golden mounds of sweet, oily, ivory meat mounts in the milk glass bowl.
Tomorrow, buddy, the work that we like the best begins. We need to buy cherries and citron, ginger and vanilla, and canned Hawaiian pineapple rinds, and raisins and walnuts and whiskey, and oh, so much flour, butter, and so many eggs, spices, flavorings. Why, we'll need a pony to bring it all home.
The next morning, we wake early, and immediately we have to face the problem. Neither of us has any money, except for the skinflint sums that other persons in our household occasionally provide, or what we earn ourselves from our annual rummage sale, or selling buckets of hand-picked blackberries, jars of homemade jam, and apple jelly and peach preserves, or rounding up flowers for funerals and weddings. Why, once we won 79th prize, $5, in a national football contest. Not that we know a fool thing about football. It's just that we enter any contest we hear about. We entered the Name That Coffee contest recently. It has a $50,000 prize. But to tell the truth, our only profitable enterprise was the Fun and Freak Museum we conducted in the woodshed 2 summers ago. The fun part was, well, we borrowed from one of our relatives, without her knowledge or approval, a stereopticon with slides of Washington, D.C. and New York City. The freak part of the museum was a 3-legged small chicken hatched by one of our own hens. Everyone wanted to see the chick. We charged grown-ups a nickel and kids 2 cents. We took in a good $20 before the museum had to shut down due to the demise of the main attraction. We keep our money in a beaded purse. This year, according to my friend's calculations, we have $12.73. According to my calculations, we haven't even $13.
Oh, buddy, I do hope you're wrong. We can't mess around with 13. The cakes will fall, or put someone in the cemetery. Why, I wouldn't dream of getting out of bed on any 13th day. And that is why I stay in bed on all the 13th days during the year. Let's be on the safe side. Take a penny and throw it out the window.
Of the ingredients that go into our fruitcakes, whiskey is the most expensive. as well as the hardest to obtain in a county where its sale is forbidden. But everyone knows you can buy a bottle from Mr. Ha Ha Jones. So we set out for Mr. Ha Ha's business address, a sinful, to quote public opinion, fish fry and dancing cafe down by the river. We have been there before and on the same errand. In previous years, our dealings have always been with Ha Ha's wife, an iodine dark Indian woman with brassy peroxide hair and a dead, tired disposition. We've never laid eyes on her husband, though we've heard that he is an Indian too, a giant with razor scars across his cheeks. They call him Ha Ha because he's a gloomy man who never laughs. As we approach his cafe, a large log cabin festooned inside and out with garish gray naked light bulbs, standing by the river's muddy edge. Our steps slow down. Even Queenie stops prancing and sticks close by. People have been murdered in Ha Ha's cafe. I knock on the door. Queenie barks.
Mrs. Ha Ha, ma'am? Anyone home?
We hear heavy footsteps approaching. The door opens, and our hearts overturn. It's Mr. Ha Ha himself. He is a giant with scars on his face. He doesn't smile. No, he glares at us through Satan-tilted eyes and demands to know what we want.
If you please, Mr. Ha Ha. Well, we'd like a quart of your finest whiskey. Oh, no, Mr. Ha Ha, it's not for drinking. It's for cooking. We're making fruitcakes.
He retreats into the shadowed cafe and seconds later reappears carrying a bottle of daisy yellow unlabeled whiskey. He demonstrates its sparkle in the sunlight and asks for $2. We pay with nickels and dimes and pennies, jangling the coins in his hand like a fistful of dice. He suddenly pours the money back into our beaded purse, and his face softens. And believe it or not, he almost smiles. For the next 4 days, the black stove stoked with coal and firewood glows like a lighted pumpkin. Egg beaters whirl and spoons spin around in bowls of butter and sugar. Vanilla sweetens the air, ginger spices it. Melting, nose-tingling odors saturate the kitchen, suffuse the house, and drift out to the world on puffs of chimney smoke. 31 fruitcakes dampened with whiskey bask on every windowsill and shelf in the house. Now you might ask, who are they for? The larger shares are for people we have never met, maybe but once, perhaps not at all. People who struck our fancy, like President and Mrs. Roosevelt, like the Reverend and Mrs. J.C. Lucy, Baptist missionaries to Borneo, who lectured here last winter, or the little knife grinder who comes through town twice a year, or Abner Parker, the driver of the 6 o'clock bus from Mobile, who exchanges waves with us every day as he passes in a dust cloud whoosh. Or the young Watsons, a California couple whose car one afternoon broke down outside our front gate. These acquaintances seem to be our best friends. The kitchen is empty. The cakes are gone. Yesterday, we carted the last of them to the post office where the cost of stamps turned our purse inside out. We're broke. This rather depresses me, but my friend insists on celebrating with 2 inches of whiskey left in a Ha Ha's bottle. Queenie has a spoonful of it in a bowl of coffee. She likes her coffee chicory-flavored and strong. The rest is divided between a pair of jelly glasses. The taste of it brings screwed-up expressions and sour shudders. But by and by, we begin to sing, the 2 of us singing different songs simultaneously. I don't know the words of mine, just come on along to the Darktown Strutters Ball. We giggle as if unseen hands were tickling us. Queenie rolls on her back, her paws plow the air at something, and a grin stretches her black lips. I feel warm and sparky as those crumbling logs, carefree as the wind in the chimney. My friend waltzes around the stove, the hem of her poor calico skirt pinched between her fingers, singing,
Oh, show me the way to go home. I had a little drink about an hour ago, and it went right to my cerebellum.
We were severely reprimanded and sent to bed. We really, really slept well that night. The next day, we began to make decorations for our Christmas tree. We sit for days at the kitchen table with scissors, and my friend cuts them out. Lots of cats, fish too, some apples, some watermelons, and a few winged angels devised from saved-up sheets of Hershey bar tinfoil. We use safety pins to attach these creations to the tree, and as a final touch, we hang a bone for Queenie high up in the tree. And then we sprinkle the branches with shredded cotton. On Christmas morning, we get up early, and then she always drops the old iron tea kettle on the stone floor, and I always tap dance in the hall outside of the bedrooms. One by one, the household emerges, looking like they'd like to kill us both. But it's Christmas, so they can't. After a big breakfast, we open our presents. I am disappointed. Who would not be? What with socks, a Sunday school shirt, some handkerchiefs, a hand-me-down sweater, and a year's subscription to a religious magazine for children. It makes me boil, it really does. My friend has a better haul. A sack of Japanese tangerines, that's her best present. She's proudest, however, of a white wool shawl knitted by her married sister. But she says her favorite gift is the kite I built for her, and it is very beautiful. Though it is not as beautiful as the one she made for me, which is blue and scattered with gold and green good conduct stars, and my name Buddy painted on it. The wind is blowing, and nothing will do till we've run to a pasture below the house where Queenie has scooted to bury her bone. There, plunging through the healthy waist-high grass, we unreel our kites, feeling them twitching at the string. Like sky fish as they swim into the wind. Satisfied and sun-warmed, we sprawl in the grass and peel tangerine and watch our kites cavort. Soon I forget the socks and the hand-me-down sweater. I'm as happy as if we'd already won the $50,000 grand prize in that coffee naming contest.
My, how foolish I am, Buddy. You know what I've always thought? I've always thought a body would have to be sick and dying before they saw the Lord. I imagined that when he came, it would be like looking at the big window down at the Baptist church, as colored glass with the sun pouring through, such a shine you don't even know that it's getting dark outside. And it's been a comfort to think of that shine taking away all the spooky feelings. But still, I'll wager it never happens. I'll wager that at the very end, a body realizes that the Lord has already shown himself, that things are as they are, just what they've always been. As for me, I could leave the world today seeing him in my eyes.
This is our last Christmas together. Life separates us. Those who think that they know best decide that I belong in a military school, and so follows a miserable succession of bugle-blowing prisons and grim reveille-ridden summer camps. I have a new home, too, but it doesn't count. Home is where my friend is, and there I never go. And there she remains, puttering around in the kitchen.
Dear Buddy, yesterday, Jim Macy's horse kicked Queenie really bad. Be thankful she didn't feel too much. I wrapped her in a fine linen sheet, and rode her in the buggy down to Simpson's pasture where she can be with all her bones.
For a few Novembers, she continues to bake her fruitcakes. Single-handed, not as many, but some, and of course, she always sends me the best of the batch. She sends me short letters, and in every one of them there is a dime wadded up in toilet paper with a note that says, "See a picture show and write the story for me." Gradually, it becomes more obvious that the 13th day of the month is not the only day she stays in bed. Then a morning arrives one cold November, a leafless, birdless coming of winter, when she cannot rouse herself to exclaim, "Oh my, it's fruitcake weather." When that happens, I know it. A message saying so merely confirms a piece of news some secret vein had already received, severing me from an irreplaceable part of myself, letting loose like a kite on a broken string. That is why, walking across a school campus this December morning, I keep searching the sky, as if I expected to see, rather like hearts, a pair of kites hurrying toward heaven. I hear you're going to have it.
To Doug and Judy, thank you again.
Thank you.
Evan is going to take over.
Thank you.
That's his job.
Memory is a powerful thing. It's a gift. What in the story, what do you remember in your own experience that was touched on in the story? Whether it was your experience of the 1930s or more likely the memories that were handed to you by loved ones. Is there anything in the story that just resonates with your own memories?
Well, my granny was a little old woman in a sweater and tennis shoes and a faded dress.
Thank you. What else resonated with your memory? How much your mother and you did not like fruitcake, but I couldn't hear the end, but she made it anyway? She made it every Christmas. Yeah. What else? What else do you remember? Here I come.
So as growing up in the South as a child, there was a lot of things that spoke to me, but one of the more baser things was I loved Hershey chocolate bars, and I remember when they were wrapped in tinfoil. They're not like that anymore, but that was really poignant to hear that. It's been a while.
Thank you. What about others? What else from that story brings back to you your own memory?
I remember seeing that production on television with Geraldine Page the last year that I went home to stay with my parents for a while. The next year, John and I got married.
Thank you. Dale.
They mentioned the shredded cotton on the Christmas tree. And I remember that growing up with parents who had been through the Depression, my favorite thing on the Christmas tree were the icicles. And every year after Christmas, we'd wrap the icicles around some cardboard so the next year we could unwrap those icicles and put them on again.
Thank you. My, one more. Yes.
This is not really a Christmas story, but when my dad was in the service, my mother would bake fruitcakes in a tin of some sort, then she would take them down to the welding shop, and he would weld a lid to them, and then she would ship them over to my dad overseas.
Thank you. I remember being a young child and hearing my parents were born in the first half of the 1950s, I remember them describing their parents and what their parents had taught them from their experience of the Great Depression, particularly the 1930s, in rural Alabama, where the story takes place. And I remember being so it was impossible for me to believe the stories about the powdered milk, the stories about recycling everything, the stories about this is your 1 year to get a Christmas present and it'll be 8 more before you get one again. It just, the stories, as the generations succeeded, that memory shifted from something that we could remember seeing and touching and experiencing to something those we remember could see and touch. And now when my children, when I describe that, most of my grandparents, none of my grandparents met my children. And so now they're completely removed from those who experienced that, at least in our family. Yet the memory is alive. It shifts, it changes, but it remains alive. There's something about remembering, about calling to mind that is not just a reflection of the past, but it's something that brings life to it. Think about those memories of your own childhood and how those memories remain alive in your mind, and allow yourself to acknowledge that the other people who witnessed those same events might not remember them the same way you do, but it doesn't matter. That when you bring them to mind, they become alive again. That's our touch to them. What about our story of faith? What about the narrative that is the narrative we participate in, the Judeo-Christian narrative, the narrative more generally of humanity? What role does memory have? When you think of expressions of our religion, of our faith, where and when do memory come alive to us? What role does memory play in our embodiment of our faith? Okay.
Music.
Music.
I sing at Christmas. I always have. My family did. I spent 6 hours yesterday singing with the Symphony of Northwest Arkansas. And I'll sing again today, because I'm going to leave in just a minute and go get in the choir. But singing happens at Christmas. Now, that's our religious celebration where we sing.
And how many of us have, I'm not asking for a show of hands, but how many of us have been with a loved one who comes back to us in song, in music? That we reach them, we connect with them in a way that we haven't seen in a while when we invite them to sing with us a favorite Christmas carol. Yes. Janice.
Well, I have a memory of one particular Christmas Eve, although it was like very many that we had. When my parents would have, we'd open some gifts on Christmas Eve. Our very closest family friends would come over and celebrate with us. And one year my mom brought out a cake. It was a birthday cake with candles. And my mom's oldest friend says, "Well, whose birthday is it?" And my mom says, "Well, it's Jesus' birthday." And she said, "Oh." I always remember that. So if, you see me breaking out in happy birthday during the service on Christmas Eve, you understand what that is.
That's right. Thank you. Other moments in your experience of faith that memory stands out, that memory plays a role? What do we mean when we say God remembers someone or remembers something? What a silly thing to say. But it means something. What do we mean by it? When and why do we articulate God remembering something, God's memory? I'm not looking for the answer that someone who went to seminary might give. I'm looking for your answer. What does it mean to you? If I were to say, if I were to sit with you in a prayer and say, God, remember this, your servant. Remember this, your child. What What does it mean for you to think of God remembering you? Is it a mere calling to mind? Is it something else? What, Trent? Speaking of answers from people who went to seminary, Trent.
Well, this is a personal one. For me, it means this sense of being held in God's heart, especially people who are forgotten. So that, and maybe acts of kindness that are not seen are kind of held in God's heart.
Thank you. Others, what does that mean to you to think of God remembering you or remembering one you love? Do you believe God ever forgets someone? I see some shaking of heads. I see some puzzled looks. I see some please, preacher man, don't tell me that's true. I don't think God forgets anyone God has made. So what are we doing when we say out loud or say in our prayers or read in the pages of Scripture that God remembers something? What are we doing? We're calling to ourselves a truth about who God is? Yes. Or who that person is? Yes. Yes. What else? What else do we mean by God remembering? We remember God. Yes. Yes. Think of that moment in the story of Noah and the ark. The story it's one of those stories that we know from childhood before we read it in the book itself, in the Bible. So we know how it's going to end. We know the rainbow. We know the floods will recede. Yet right in the middle of it, we encounter, in the midst of the rain, the ark is full of animals, Noah and his family, on the waves. And in that moment, the story of Scripture tells us God remembered Noah and his sons, the language it uses, and the animals. God remembered, which becomes kind of a hinge for the story, doesn't it? A turn. Even though we know how the story is going to end, and even though God knows how the story is going to end, we think, or not, and even though it's, God has said to Noah at the beginning, build this ark because I'm going to preserve you and two of every animal, yet still, it's that moment in the midst of the flood that memory kind of shines down and becomes a vehicle, a path for that salvation, which perhaps was always coming, but now we remember it. Now we see it.
There's a play about that where they send the dove out and they're still in the water. And when it hits land, the dove comes back with the branch in its beak. God remembered.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. In the story, in the play, in A Christmas Story that we heard, who are the ones that Buddy and his friend, his cousin, who are the ones that they remember? Go choir call, that's right. Who are the ones that they remember when they're making their fruitcakes? I'm sorry, I can't hear. Who are they? Who are the ones they remember? The people who have made an impact on them. Yes, and I love the line. The majority of whom, or the bulk of whom, they don't know, or maybe only met once. Right in that lovely list, President Roosevelt and his wife, right, Eleanor, the person whose car broke down right in front of their gate, the missionary who had been, a wonderful list. What does that tell you about the role of memory in the lives of these two joyful, faithful people in the story? What does their memory give? Y'all are a quiet group this morning. What does their memory give? Or reflect? Doesn't it reflect not only a moment for the past, Elliot? Thank you, Chuck.
Whether they're doing it consciously or purposely or not, that their instinct is to remember the best and to hold that as part of their character, make that part of their character, who they are.
Yeah, and so they're remembering it, they're intentional about it, but the person whose car broke down in front of their house, without the act of remembering them, without the gesture that surrounds, that's centered on that memory, that's just a moment that fades away. That encounter, that moment, that gift of that person's presence in their life for even a day, the change that it brought, the conversation that it had, it comes back to them as they make their fruitcake and send it off. The lecture that the Baptist missionary who's in Borneo gave, is life is breathed into it again as they're making that fruitcake. I wonder if there are ways in your life that you remember sort of isolated moments from the past, but that they still affect you, they still influence you, they still guide you because of the memory, which reaches back and brings them into the present. Are there moments, are there isolated encounters from your past that still shape who you are today? I see nods. Anybody willing to share a story of that? Trent?
But I hope I don't. It's about my father. And so Dad grew up. He was a World War II veteran, so he kind of grew up in that pre-World War II generation. And his father had poor health and had to kind of retire somewhat early, so they lived on a tight budget. And I remember him telling me the story of the time he got a bicycle. And I remember as a child, I used to get just a ridiculous number of presents under the tree. And to hear him talk about that was really touching. And I remember one Christmas, I'd gone away to college, and my old bike was just sitting on the porch. And he said, "Do you want that?" You know, and I said, "No." So he gave it to someone who was refurbishing bikes for little children without bikes. And so he did that, and I came home for Christmas, and my father never cried, and I saw him crying. And he had this thank you letter from this little child who received the bike, and that was very touching to me. And the thing I hold from that is just being grateful for what we have.
Thank you. There's an act of faithfulness that is holding that in the present and not letting it disappear or fade away. Yeah. Maybe time for one other story? Yep, thank you. I bet Chuck can get there first.
May have nothing to do with anything. If memory is true or not, if you know what I mean, like, don't you remember this? You might see a picture of something and you'll piece together and it's your memory. It may not be the accurate truth, but does that matter?
Does it matter?
You know, it's kind of fiction and it becomes kind of a story that builds on itself, and maybe that's just fine.
Yeah, and I wonder it's not always conscious, but how we remember that, how we piece that together, says something about our direction, our attitude, our own hopes and guidance. And I think there's something about choosing how we hold on to that, how we hold on to those moments. Yeah. Thank y'all for being here. Thank you again to Judy and to Doug for leading that. Thank you to Chuck for presenting this. Chuck, what are we hearing next? Are we hearing a Reader Theater next week?
No.
No Reader Theater next week. No Reader Theater next week. Instead, we'll have a quick adult class on the 23rd. Thank y'all all for being here today. Thank you.